Hey, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Daily Dharma Gathering. My name's Rebecca, and I'm your host this evening. We are lucky enough to have Venerable Tumten Chunyi with us again. She will be speaking about living like we believe in karma. If you'll look below the video, you'll see her biography. So go ahead and check that out. You can see she's got a lot of experience. And she's been teaching on the DDG for a while now, and it's always a pleasure. So without further ado, one reminder I forgot. If you have questions, put them in the comment box. It's at the very bottom of the page. And then I'll read those out to Chunyi, and she can answer those questions for us. So now, without any delay, I'm going to turn it over to her.
Okay. Thank you, Rebecca, and good evening, everybody. So this is the early part of the month, right? So we're starting a new theme at Daily Dharma Gathering on karma. And I don't know how comfortable that topic is with a lot of people. So I thought tonight we'd do a little bit of meditation to start as usual and think a little bit about how this idea of karma fits, and then why it's important for us to actually think about it. What's useful about it? So let's just start with some meditation. So wherever you are, in your office chair, on your couch at home, in your bed, wherever, get your spine straight. If you're not on a cushion on the floor, get your feet flat on the floor. Yeah. Lift your shoulders a couple of times and drop them up to your ears, and then let them go completely. Yeah. Again, up, release. And so we take your meditation posture with your spine straight, feet flat on the floor. In our tradition, we practice with our hands in the lap, with left hand on the bottom, right on the top, with thumbs touching, like so. But in your lap, right up next to your belly button. I know some teachers have your hands on the thighs, so if that's more comfortable or familiar, that's fine. Shoulders level. Lips closed, but your teeth are not clenched. Your jaw is relaxed, but your lips are closed, and eyes lowered, so that a little bit of light comes in. Not so much that it distracts you, that you see images and so forth, but enough that the light can help keep you awake. So feel your presence in the chair, your connection with the floor. Feel where you are in the room. Note the temperature. Notice any sights or sounds or smells, but don't fix on them. Just let them pass through your awareness. Slowly become aware of your body from the bottoms of your feet, up your legs to your knees, thighs to hips. And if you find any tension there, breathe into it and just flex it, let it out a little bit. And then be aware of your back, starting right at the tailbone, being aware of any sensations moving up the spine, the muscles in your back. Again, if you find any tightness, breathe into it. You can adjust as you need to. Move your attention to the front of your body, from the pelvis right up to your throat. Slowly just checking in. Note especially if there's tension in your belly or in your chest. Be aware of any sensations in the organs in the body. And if you find any discomfort or tension, breathe into it and let it soften. And move your attention into your throat and neck, being aware of any tightness or tension, adjusting as you need to get into a more relaxed or more natural posture. Breathe into that too. And then move your attention into your jaw and face. Let a little smile, just a little. Not a big forced grin, but just a little uplift of the corners of the mouth. Softens the whole face, maybe softens the mind too. And then move your attention to your breathing. No need to change it, just notice it moving in, moving out. Being aware of the texture of your breath, if you will. Fast or slow, rough or smooth. But again, without really analyzing or catching on to it, just be aware, just notice. And take a few minutes to let your attention rest, either at your belly or at your upper lip and nostrils, either place that you feel the breath. And we'll just spend a few minutes in silence, allowing that breath to bring us present to this very moment now. And then let's set a motivation for our time together. And as we explore this topic of karma, intended action, as we become more aware of our own actions and their results, as we adopt a more conscious and conscientious move towards non-harming, that has a huge effect on the people around us and in the world. And so let's set the intention that as we explore this topic tonight, that the virtue, the goodness that we generate in our hearts and in our minds together will have this ripple effect that feeds the seeds of our own potential to grow and grow till we're fully awakened. And also helps to bring about an awakening, greater compassion in the world and the people around us, till all beings are liberated. And before we end the meditation, I want to just give this quote from the Buddha and let that rest in our space of reflection, where he said, "Just as the shadows of birds in the sky move along with them, beings are followed by the right and wrong they have done. So think about that a minute. Birds in the sky, the shadow on the ground follows the flight. And just at that same way, our actions, the results of our actions, like the energy trace of our actions, follow us and create causes for the future, even as they ripen as results. So I love talking about this topic of karma. And it came up in a class I was teaching this week, and I recognize that it's not always easy for people. So I want to speak of it tonight really in terms of the very simple laws of cause and result. Cause and result. So according to the Buddha's teachings, every single moment of pleasure that we experience comes not from the stimulus that we think, but comes from a past virtuous action. Everything. Further, every single pain, suffering, discomfort that we experience arises due to a past destructive action. Cause and result. It's a little bit hard to grasp, isn't it? Because, of course, we immediately think, if I'm going to eat that ice cream sundae, I experience that pleasure as soon as that ice cream hits my mouth. And then if I have more than 2 bites, personally, I go into a lot of misery right away. But for some of us, it takes a little longer. But still, it's hard to relate that having that moment of pleasure comes from something I did in the past. Totally. But you know, even in a non-Buddhist sense, we have this idea that what goes around comes around. As you shall reap what you have sown. I mean, we kind of all grew up with this. So it's not so out of the ordinary to think about this. And it's very useful to reflect, not so much from the past, although that's also useful. But even more useful is looking at now, what are the causes that I'm creating by my actions today? So we can spend countless sleepless hours trying to decide, should I buy this house? Should I not buy this house? Should I offer more money? Should I not offer more money? You know, do I need to have it inspected again? Round and round and round about, should I do this? Should I do this? Should I do that? Looking for the result that will bring us the happiness of a new home, in that case, for example. But in a and it'll have a big effect on our whole life. There's no question about that. But much more of an effect, and also more subtle, is this question of what am I doing with my body, speech, and mind today that will cause my future happiness? It's not something we ever think about. It doesn't come to mind. It doesn't occur to us that what I'm doing today will bring about future happiness or future suffering. So that's why it's very important to look at this Buddhist idea and go, well, does this make sense to me? Does this really work? So let's talk about it in terms of just cause and effect. And the gardening analogy is the classic one that they teach in Buddhist texts, and it's perfect. I mean, if you want vegetables this summer, you have to plant seeds. This is very clear. And, you know, if you'd rather buy your food than grow it, then you have to get a job or apply for food stamps or find some other way to do it. But but an action has to be taken that has a result, that will lead to the result that you want. And it's not just that the spinach just rises spontaneously out of the ground. We have to deliberately put in the seed. We have to make sure that the soil is fertile. We have to make sure that it's in a sunny enough spot that it gets enough light. We have to remember to go out and water it every afternoon or every other afternoon. We have to keep the slugs away. We have to make sure the voles don't come chew it up. We have to keep the kids and the dog out of the garden. I mean, all these conditions have to come together to get this result of the spinach. And if we weren't tracking it, you know, you could very easily, somebody who hadn't planted the seed could very easily go out there. What does it take, about 6 weeks for spinach to come up? Maybe 4 before you have something viable? I don't remember. But somebody could just go out and go, oh, look, miraculous. There's spinach growing out of the ground. Let's eat it. Forgetting totally that we already planted this seed. Being completely unaware that we watered this seed. But in fact, that's how the spinach got there. We planted the seed and we watered it. And the seed is essential. We have to have that seed. If we don't have the seed, we just have a plot of nice dirt that we've been watering and whatever. So we both need the seed and we need the conditions. Clear? That part's clear, right? So in the natural world, cause and effect requires these 3 factors. So first of all, things can't and don't come from nothing. Everything arises from a cause. Everything that exists, that is produced, arises from a cause. It doesn't just come from nowhere. The other factor is impermanence. Without the ability to change, nothing could produce results. And then there has to be this potential that is that correlates with the result. So it's obviously that a pepper seed does not make spinach grow. Pepper seeds make peppers grow, spinach seeds make spinach grow, if the conditions are right. So this logic applies to everything. There's the physical world, and then when we start to talking about karma and its effects, we're talking about our mind. We're talking about our internal world, our experience, our intentions, our motivations, and then how these affect our experience. So the main meaning of karma is volitional or intended action. That's what it means. Intended action. And, you know, we're intending actions all day. We're just not very mindful about it. We're intending, oh, I have a full thirst, I'm intending to pick up this cup. That's a pretty neutral action. I see, you know, in the mail, somebody writes about the feeding the kids for the summer, hungry kids for the summer program. My intention to send a check to them comes from what? A moment of compassion, a moment of generosity. I look at my checkbook, I don't have much money, $10 is good. I send the check. I look at my checkbook, doesn't look so good, I think I won't send them a check. Both of those are intended actions. They may even have a virtuous motivation behind them. If I go ahead and send the check, then this sends forth an energy of generosity that leaves a little bit of a trace on my mind stream. Kind of like putting a seed there. And when all the conditions come together, that act of generosity reaps a result that is somehow my own happiness. And they say that in generosity, the result is that you also get what you need. So giving produces getting. And in the same way, If we refrain from speaking a snarky comment, well, this is actually an act of generosity. It's a virtuous action. Oh, I wanted to say something really snotty to that person and I didn't. That planted a seed of goodness in my mind. Whereas I just let it rip, I say it, I see their feelings. Well, I just planted a destructive seed in my mind. That will result someday, somehow, in my own hearing such kind of harmful speech. So it sounds like reward and punishment to our ears who are used to hearing reward and punishment. Somebody says that you were bad. You were going to either go to hell or to heaven if you weren't bad. You know, that's sort of the paradigm that we live in, and it's very important to separate our minds from that, and it's hard to do. That's why I'm bringing it up. So that we don't look at this cause and result that the Buddha described. He didn't make this up, but he described as on the basis of his awakened mind. So, oh, that's why people suffer. People suffer because their negative action leaves this imprint in their mind, and then they experience a result later on. So when we begin to practice Buddhism, or practice really new spiritual practice, that says first do no harm, we're not taking on this thing about do no harm because it's bad to be harmful. We're not doing it even because we don't want to hurt the other person, really. Why should we refrain from harm? Because when we harm others, we experience a suffering result. When we act in beneficial ways, we experience a happy result. Sometimes it's not immediate. You know, they say this is so complex that even an enlightened mind, only an enlightened mind can know the details of this cause and effect, like what exactly I did here that would result in that over there. But the general trend of plant the spinach seed, get the spinach, plant the generous act, receive generosity, is quite logical if we think about it. And if we look at our lives, it's not out of the realm of possibility to see the trend. If I spend my whole life in a habit of backbiting, is it any surprise that people talk about me behind my back? None. None. If I start to curb my language just a little bit, I can begin to see that my mind is different. If I don't jump into that office bashing at the water cooler or at the coffee pot, it changes my mood right then. And then, from the law of cause and effect, I'm changing the energy that I put forward. Getting some sense there? Yeah. So it's useful. It's really useful to think about this. It's a very detailed and large topic to look at in great detail. And we won't do that tonight, obviously, and that may not even be necessary. But to start with these ideas, there's 4 factors or characteristics of this volitional action, karma, that are good to remember. One is that karma is definite, in that virtuous actions result in happiness. Non-virtuous actions result in suffering of some kind, which then makes us study, well, what is a virtuous action and what is a non-virtuous action? But that's another lesson. But in some ways, we also know right away. We know if we're speaking out of anger. We know if we're speaking out of love. Simple. The second characteristic is that karma is expandable. And that simply means that a small action can lead to a large result. The analogy most classically used is that a small acorn can lead to an enormous oak tree. And maybe we've seen in our own lives that making a tiny little lie can lead to a huge fiasco. Third, we will not experience the effect of an action we haven't done. So if we're wishing that we could, I don't know, have enough money to have dinner. If we haven't created the causes, if we haven't practiced generosity in our lives in the past, and we're talking multiple lives here too, so that's a context. But even this very life, if generosity has not been our way of thinking, then to expect that miraculously things are going to fall into our lap doesn't make sense. And then the fourth one is actions that we do are never wasted, which means that if we do a strong negative action in this life, sooner or later, this life or a future life will experience a result from that action. If we don't purify it, it can be purified. It can be purified. So don't go into, oh no, what have I done? Because, why? Because we're talking about the mind. We're talking about our experience. When we look at, when we talk about karma, it's so easy to think it's all external actions, and that doesn't make any sense. But if we think that we're talking about our mind, a seed we're planting in our own mind that results in the experience that we have in our own mind, then it starts to make more sense. You get what I mean? So it's parallel to the spinach goes into the dirt and becomes a plant. But we're not talking now about chemicals and elements. We're talking about consciousness. Same logic, different medium. So it's useful. I want to go back to we're right at the end. I want to go back to the verse from the very beginning as just a guidepost to meditate on, something to reflect on. It's a condensation of the Buddha's teaching here. Just as the shadows of birds in the sky move along with them, beings, us, are followed by the right and wrong they have done. And then I will add, not as punishment and reward, but simply cause result. Takes all the moral judgment out of it. It's also the guilt and shame. Simply cause and result. Very clean way of thinking. Yeah, it's big. But in a month of karma, why not start with the basics, right? So do we have time for questions?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's see if we have any questions. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yep, we have something here from Stephen. He says, thank you, Tupten. If I remember correctly, I read that the Buddha said one of the only times when we are not creating karma is when we are in meditation. It is an interesting notion. Can you speak to that a little, please?
I'm not aware of that quote, Stephen, so I'm not sure the context that the Buddha would have been speaking of. Because even in meditation, it's an intended action. We're creating a lot of virtue if our mind's, in a meditative state. It could be, that he was speaking of some level of meditative absorption that I'm not aware of. It's much deeper than any meditation I know. But as far as I know, pretty much every moment we're creating virtuous, non-virtuous, or neutral actions, planting the seeds constantly. And when we're in meditation, if you're concentrating, or even if we're just trying hard to stay concentrated, creating virtue.
Okay. So we have a couple more questions here.
Yeah.
This is from Mary. I don't know who said it. Act without attachment to the fruit of the act. This karma sounds like it could be interpreted as choosing acts so that we will have a positive benefit, which would be an attachment to the outcome. What do you think?
Well, I think there's two different ways of looking at it. Because, and I don't quote the Dalai Lama on this, but he says, we want to be happy. We don't want to suffer. And actually, it's a spiritual practice for us for us to pursue our happiness. And I balked at that at first. I thought, oh, surely there's something higher than that. But if we think about it, if we're creating virtue, if we're trying to create a sense of contentment, then not an attached happiness, not an exhilarated sense pleasure happiness, but a sense of fulfillment and contentment and peace, that kind of happiness, then we're probably not grasping at it, but we are aspiring for something that's a really wonderful state of mind that gives us the space to be a benefit to all kinds of beings. So I think one could grasp at it. Oh, I'm only going to do good things because I want to have a lot of money in the future. That would be a pretty distorted way of going about it, and we can slip into it easily, for sure. But the bigger picture of genuinely working for our own happiness so that we have the capacity to be of benefit and also have some sense of contentment and wholeness seems to be like fulfilling our spiritual potential, actually, and pursuing it. Yeah, does that make sense?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
And so we have one last question here from Sandy. How do we avoid trying to bargain for luck via our actions?
Yeah, well, for one thing, we don't actually have the control. We don't have that control. Because the other thing about putting in the seed, of course, is that there's all these other conditions involved. When it ripens, how it ripens, where it ripens, that we don't know. So, we might try to control the outcome, but soon we learn that we can't. And but and certainly as people begin to practice, especially the ethic of non-harming and working to genuinely try to create virtue as a way of purifying and as a way of creating the spiritual environment for which we can develop deeper and deeper practice, then the sense of contentment or peace or wholeness that we recognize becomes its own reward. And it's not a big thing that we grasp for, but we notice. Living conscientiously, trying to be more ethical in my thinking, trying to overcome the afflictions intentionally. This has a positive effect. This has a kind of happiness growing in me that's not dependent on external causes. And that's its own reward. Reward in quotes.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
So we have run over a little bit, and we don't have any more questions, so
okay.
It seems like a good time to stop.
Good time to stop. Enjoy your month on karma. And let's dedicate, because this also creates good virtue, just dedicate all the virtue of being together for half an hour to explore something that, to explore the ideas of Buddha's teachings. That is hugely beneficial to our minds and plants good seeds. So may all the benefit of that ripen in our own awakening and also in our capacity to benefit others. So thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. Thanks everyone for joining us. See you all tomorrow night. Bye for now.